Hi, I am Jasmine Katatikarn, a co-founder of the Academy of Animated Art, and with me today is Shane Sternstein, who will be providing professional feedback to our students this September. And we thought we'd just get on and, just chat, and you can meet Shane and just get to know a little bit more about the Academy as well. So, to kick it off, Shane, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, my name is Shane, as was just mentioned, and I've been in the industry for about 15 years. Initially, doing advertising at first, being on the creative side, then going into the production side and producing for about 5 years, which was pretty intense. But I decided to take a sabbatical and then retrain myself and also go to school again at the Academy of Animated Art and kind of build my portfolio and do what I really wanted to do, which was being in film or animation. And spent about 6 months kind of just building that portfolio. And then I was lucky enough to get hired at Dreamworks, and I've been there for 5 years. Right now, I am a lead lighting artist and working on a new film, which I can't say, but it's really, really exciting. And I'm happy to be here and hopefully to give everyone some really insightful information.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I remember those moments where it's like, I'm working on something, but I can't talk about it. That happens a lot in this industry. And you touched upon it, but I am super excited because you are our first alum who's returning back to give a professional feedback. So, how does it feel to be back at the Academy of Animated Art, but this time as a mentor?
It's really exciting. It's full circle. Like starting as a student, you're just constantly wanting to learn and progress, and now to be able to be in the opposite perspective and try to help and plus help everyone plus their work to be very inspiring and visually appealing to potentially get like a really great job, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And what should students expect from your feedback and style? Because that's what I love about having rotating mentors come in because you kind of get different perspectives all the time. People have different styles. So, what would you say your feedback style is like?
Yeah, what I would really like to look at and kind of dive in is storytelling. You
Mm.
know, what are we trying to tell the viewer before we get into like the nitty gritty? Because we'll definitely go over fundamentals and we'll definitely go into the details of lighting and what it does. But I think it comes back to how are we trying to tell a story within a single image. And we'll be going over motivation. We'll be going over what the mood is, the tones, what we want the viewer to feel. So I think it's going to be a lot of global stuff at first, and getting an understanding of what we're trying to tell, and then we can start chipping away and starting to get more into the the smaller granular details.
I love that, and that aligns completely with what the academy does, and also how I live my life. Even things that you don't think about, everything comes down to story. Like I have to write a paragraph for, a written word. I'm like, well, what's my story? And yeah, everything relates to what story are you trying to tell? And especially within lighting, there's so many ways you can do it, and it's super inspiring. And yeah, learning from someone like you is so beneficial, and it helps you think about things that you would never think about before.
Absolutely. Like
Yeah.
once you have an idea of what you want to tell, then you can start being creative with it and
Mhm.
thinking of different ways of telling it. So I think that's the very first thing that we'll probably dive into as I go through everyone's work and try to really get an understanding of what we want to tell. And we know I know that a lot of the artists have already progressed a lot into what they've been a lot of the images they've created, but it's kind of nice and refreshing sometimes to kind of go back to the beginning and think, okay, what am I really trying to say here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much benefit in just going back to the beginning, the fundamental, especially when you feel like you're stuck. But
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like, yeah, we can talk a long time about this. One thing I am curious to tap your mind on, since you were an Academy of Anime Arts student, so you were basically you were in the same shoes as these students you're about to give feedback to. What aspects of the program or the community significantly impacted your growth as an artist? I'm curious to get your perspective because that way you can kind of tap in and give the current students that insight to, 10x it almost, like be like, oh, that's what's going to help me.
Yeah, it's really utilizing that hive mind mentality, like
Mm.
putting out as many questions as possible. If if like what I usually do just in general is I do like the 15-minute rule. I work on something for 15 minutes. If I can't really, if I feel stuck or I need some additional help, I just ask questions. And what's great about the Discord community is there's so many other perspectives that you might not even be thinking about, and they can help you kind of keep pushing. And it might not be exactly what you're looking for, but it might actually spark another inspiring direction that you want to go in. So to me, it's very much about how asking questions and even participating. If sometimes it's really hard to give criticism, but any little bit kind of, like I was saying earlier, like it creates this perspective that someone might not ever see.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I like 15 minutes better. I used to give myself 30 minutes, but then you just saved my time in half probably of like trying to figure out something myself. But yeah, the community just asking those questions. I think the key to those that learn fast are there's no fear in asking. There's no stupid
Yeah,
questions, just someone's going to have it, or if they don't have it, then you kind of brainstorm together. But yeah, utilizing the community is huge. And that's what, you have the whole channel and the community. Just when else are you going to find a group of like everyone learning kind of similar things in the 3D space? It's just, yeah, it's a wonderful resource to tap into.
I think
Yeah.
the progression of Academy of Animated Art has grown so much too. Like when I first started, we didn't have as many people in the community as there is now. Like it
Mhm.
was very much like, okay, I'm gonna pick Mike and Jasmine's brain as much as possible. But now it's grown, and it's not just you and Mike anymore. It's there's so many other artists that you can just get information or feedback from. So
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I totally agree. And that was intentional in the fact that, yeah, Mike and I, we love to help and do everything, but we understand we don't know it all either. I mean, there's so many different perspectives. The more minds you have, the more creativity in the community, like the more perspectives, the greater the resources are.
yeah.
So you're definitely right. We have grown since you've been there when you're a student, and it's great to see that progression. Yeah. So speaking of that and like professional growth, I'm curious, since your time as a student, how has your career in lighting and animation evolved? And I guess what projects are you really proud of since you've, been working in the industry for quite a while now?
Yeah. So being at Dreamworks been 5 years, and I've worked on numerous movies. And what's been really great is I started out as a trainee. I didn't even go in as just a regular lighter. I went in as a trainee, and the progression of going from trainee to lighter to being a lead, and now I'm working in doing visual development. So I'm starting very early on these movies
Mm.
to be able to help uh, build the workflows and build the pipelines, and then on top of that, helping guide the vision of the look too. So it's been really humbling to be able to kind of start lower and then grow and continue to and like I love to learn. I love to like every day. I always try to learn something new. So like when I'm there at the studio, I just constantly similar to what you were saying earlier, I constantly ask questions just to kind of keep growing and make the images the best possible aesthetic I can.
Yeah. That's amazing. I think everyone should take note on that seemingly simple tip of like asking questions, being curious, but that is what will excel you. And I think your story, what you just said, you're very humble about, but it's like it's amazing. And in a relatively short amount of time that you started out as a trainee and you're a lead now, and it's a great story. And I think what you keep on saying is like how you ask questions. That's why I want to kind of stamp on this point where it's a never ending learning journey. And as long as you stay curious, keep on asking those questions, is always like the progression and the way to grow. And speaking of that, I am very curious about your thoughts about, since the animation industry is constantly evolving, do you see what key trends or changes have you noticed, and how do you think students can best prepare themselves for
Yeah.
the current job market? Yeah.
Right now it's such a transitional period, I'd say. Before, like when I first started, PBR, like physically based rendering, like like cinematography style, like Roger Deakins was very influential, like the realism. And now it's starting to transition into creating these styles, these like painterly styles, these drawn styles. We at DreamWorks we did it just recently with the bad guys and Puss in Boots: Last Wish, where we really pushed the medium a bit. You're seeing it with Spider Verse. You're seeing it with Elemental. Even had very was a very stylized movie compared to what Pixar normally does. So there's oh, and just recently with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like that was another really cool, like painterly style. So I think if everyone could just like think about even experimenting a little bit, what can we do to kind of like push yourselves not just in a render engine, but outside of that too in Nuke? How can you, or your compositing package? How can you kind of create some of these different looks or try to simulate it a little bit and test like kind of how far you want to like push the look that you're doing the PBR style and the physically based render style is still great. That fundamental is you're always going to need that, but it's also cool now that this generation has really attached to like some of these cool painterly styles. It's also kind of like go outside a bit and see and experiment and see what else you can do with the look.
Yeah, I love that. I did just notice that with the turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yeah, it definitely feels like that trend. And I was just saying to someone else, I remember when we were doing look dev on Nimona when I was
Right,
at Blue
right.
Sky, and it's also kind of that stylized feel. And from a lighting perspective, it is so interesting and quite challenging in so many ways to create that style. So I think that's a great call out on, expanding from just a traditional like PBR. And like I think that's a great foundation. It almost reminds me of, like the best artists, the fine artists, like they learn the foundation and then they know how to break it. It's like learn
Right.
the, and they have that for every creative profession, cooks, artists, and this is a great, yeah, call out as well. And I think that'd be so much fun too for people as they get to kind of really think outside the box, create outside the box, literally, like try
Right.
something, right? Yeah.
I mean, as we're artists and lighters, as lighters, we tend to split ourselves into kind of different ways of thinking. We want to think like a cinematographer, like what's light doing and what is the camera doing.
Mhm.
And on top of that, we want to think like painters as well. Like how are we creating this graphical image? How are we splitting in region and creating regions? How are we simplifying certain things like and color theory? And so it's like we meld ourselves into these ways of thinking to build an image. So right now we're almost kind of pushing ourselves more towards the painting side, and I'm not saying less of the cinematographer side, because I constantly, and I bring this up again, I constantly try to think like Roger Deakins a lot because the way he builds his images is very simple. Like there's a complexity to it, but like he creates a simplicity in the image to allow the viewer to feel something really quickly. So it's really trying to meld all of those different aspects of your artistry together.
Yeah, absolutely. When you mentioned that, what came to mind was the kind of what I love about lighting or anything in the 3D field actually is this combination of art and tech, right? You have the fine arts and you have a very technical aspect to it as well. I'm curious, like considering, from where you stand, what advice would you have for current students in that regard? Like, I know I get a lot of questions from students about the technical aspects versus, the art foundation. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you need both, and I'm always learning a little bit here. I switch from both, and I'm like just recently I'm going back and learning math again. Like
Mhm.
I like in this industry and going to school. I went to art school. Like I was not good at math. I have to admit that. But like as I've kind of grown and pushed myself creatively, I've also wanted to go and kind of and going to like Nuke, build gizmos, build tools, and I've kind of wanted to use those tools to help guide my creative side as well. So I've always moved back and forth. I've always like technically when it comes to like just understanding what is the render engine doing, what does the light do? Like you don't need to know all the functions but like understanding the theories of what light does is really going to help you become a better artist. And then on top of that, just always then moving back to the creative side and doing things that will help spark imagination. So doing photography, doing painting, I love ceramics. It's like it's all these different kind of mediums to kind of just help you think of ways to break out of the mold a bit and not be like cliche.
Mhm.
And so it's like it's learning a little bit of technical, then going back to creative. It's kind of doing a pinball effect of just going back and forth. And I tend not to try to stay into one element for too long because then my focus as the bigger picture starts to broaden instead of narrow. So if I keep going back and forth and kind of just doing a little bit of technical, a little bit of learning a little bit of creative, I think it just helps balance you as an artist.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what one thing that you mentioned reminded me of kind of how we started. It goes back to the story. Like, so when you say, well, one, you're never supposed to say you're not good at math because I just learned that as a parent that you don't say that. Like, that's a mind block. So you are good at math, but it's like you mentioned, oh, because there's a gizmo I want to create, or like, you know, that I think that is a key to unlocking if you find yourself that there's an obstacle, a barrier, like a mind barrier, like I don't think I can do that technically or whatever. If there's a mission, like, oh, I want to make this
Yes.
gizmo, I want to create this look, then that unlocks that kind of tech motivation instead of saying, oh, I'm going to learn Python. I've tried that way of, and then the Python book just kind of like has dust on it, right? But if I have a specific thing that I want to create, oh, and then it requires Python, I'm going to go motivate. And it's like basically I go back to telling it's like, what's the story I'm trying to tell? Oh, okay, what elements do I need to gain
Yes. Yes.
from that? And I think that's also a great key to anyone that might have a blocker in either direction. It's just like you said, we kind of collaborate, you all work together. And I also like you call out on like doing other things as well to kind of spark outside creative things like pottery or something like totally that's not related. But I have this, I think everything is related. Like
Hmm.
even just taking a walk, you might think it's not going to bring up anything. Maybe it won't, but maybe in a week or two, you'll like, oh, actually, it did, right? Maybe in a year. So I love that perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. To go back to that a little bit, and in the sense of being in that of talking about the block. It's like if I do feel like there is a block, I also make a plan. I think that's what, like, even as a student, wanting to break into animation, trying to get into one of the big studios, that feels daunting at first. But if you break it into small chunks and you look at a goal and you try to find a way to reach that goal and you do it in the small increments, it's a little bit easier than trying to do it all at once. And that's how I learned Python too. It wasn't like because at first it's like, oh, Python, that's a new language. But if you say no, like I want, and to what you're saying too, it's like use it for an application. Like I want to get to this goal of building this tool. So okay, well, I want to build it by what time? And I'm going to give myself 3 months. You know, okay, that means every day I'm just going to do a little bit. I'm going to start in this chapter and then start learning this. And then next week I'm going to learn another thing and then kind of keep progressing, because as you learn one thing, it starts to become exponential, and the next thing that you learn gets a little bit easier and a little bit easier. But if you're looking at like, I need to learn everything at once, that's when it becomes really challenging. But if you break it up in small tiny bits, then it starts to help to realize what you can actually achieve.
Yeah, absolutely, 110%. I always say that to myself too whenever I feel daunted. It's like, what's the first step in order to just start? I mean, starting is the hardest part. And I get that all the time from students that want to start learning lighting, but some of them don't even have 3D experience and feel
Mhm.
really daunting. But I'm like, no, don't worry, because we have that first step. We have the Meyer intro class or whatever intro workshop classes. And it's just those small steps. And before you know it, that same student within a month or two, by consistently breaking it down, they're working in 3D, they're creating their lighting shots, and it's great to see. But I think it's that start point, and also identifying those small steps instead of looking at it in one big chunk is a key thing. So I'm glad you called that out. And to end, I'd love to, have you, since as we said, like you were sitting in the same seats as these students, and now you're a lead lighting artist at Dreamworks, possibly a lot of these people's dream jobs. What advice do you have for the current students who, aspire to excel in the animation industry?
Yeah, I think if you where you want to go and going into animation, the the big thing is when it comes to building, I think going back to just your reel, if you want to like build your reel, think about where you're trying to go. Like,
Mm.
yeah, it's a bit of marketing. Yeah, it's like what I did with my reel was uh, I said, okay, how am I going to get my images to appeal to the animation industry? Well, I created each one specifically that had told a story, and kind of going back to that again. So each one of my pieces in my reel when I was as a student had to do with the story, and it also had a little bit that style that uh, people were accustomed to. Again, going back to the physically based stuff, but like it was like very Pixar, very DreamWorks, very Disney, Blue Sky. It all had these different. I tried to put in a little bit of those elements into it. Additionally, just continuously be open to learning.
Mm.
Um, just always want to like have that drive to kind of learn something new all the time. I think that helps you get really motivated of like with if you have an image that you want to try to achieve, you just dive right into it and get um, inspired by everything about it. You pull all your reference, you write down like what's your story elements, what you want to try to do, and then you focus on that. And if it's not, after a while, that's another thing too. After a while, if it doesn't feel right and you want to try something else, you can go and do that and experiment with that for a little bit, and then come back to and you can come back to what you were doing originally. So as a student, what's great is you don't have to stick within one image or one project. You can start experimenting with other stuff, and that a lot of times that helps you keep pushing your original image as well. So I think it's perseverance. It's a little bit of learning. It's a little bit of focus and learning what knowing what you want to achieve. That'll help you kind of get to that next level.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I mean, I was just talking to someone today saying, all right, first step, you need to know what you want because otherwise, how are you going to get there? So, yeah, the focus is key. I love that. Any last, things that you want to tell the students before you give them this amazing feedback this month?
I'm just really excited to spend time with everybody, learn all your personal styles and what you like to do, what you're interested in, and really help you plus your images and help you grow as an artist. And I really just can't wait to dive in.
Amazing. So, if you want to meet Shane, you know where to find him this month. He's giving professional feedback this September to all our Academy of Animated Art lighting students. And yeah, thank you so much, Shane. And I really look forward to seeing the stories that you helped craft this month.
Sounds great. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
of course. Thank you. Happy lighting. Happy lighting. Happy lighting.